If we can reset for just a second, we'll take a look at the next bill coming up. We'll wait until the end for that.
CACR
CACR22.
22.
Yeah, we might as well get rid of this one. Welcome to Legislative Administration. We're opening the hearing on CACR 22, and I recognize the prime sponsor, Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Chairman Hill, Ranking Member Wall, and friends and colleagues on the House Legislative Administration Committee. It's always a pleasure to be before the clerk's favorite committee, so I want to do a good job by him.
That's right.
And he's in Australia right now, so I really want to do a good job. He's probably watching. So, Mr. Chairman, I have the distinct privilege of walking across a bed of hot coals in front of your committee to introduce a constitutional amendment. And I did so introducing CACR 22 under the assumption that this legislature has been debating the issue of salary for a long time. As you know, being the chair of this committee, you see perennially almost legislation brought forward to try and amend the Constitution, either by changing the formula through which the legislature is paid or by raising the dollar amount or something along those lines. All of those bills are frivolous in nature because I believe at my core that we shouldn't be budgeting salaries through a document as stagnant as the state constitution. In the late 1800s, the reason why the salary is set out in the Constitution, as I'm sure you know, but for the record, the late 1800s, the legislature was here for about 8 weeks out of the year. So they would serve for the 2-year term, but would only really be here in Concord for about 8 weeks. So they'd make around an average of $150 a term with a per diem of $3 a day at a time when the average worker in this state was making somewhere between 50 cents and $1. So they were making decent money here in the legislature for those 8 weeks because the people of the state recognized that they are spending their time here, etc. But when the legislature was voted out, almost 80% of the legislature was voted out in a particular term, and 80% gets voted in. The new freshman literal body, where 80% of them were freshmen, stayed in office for a little bit longer than 8 weeks. And so they ended up making a lot more than $150 a day, that $150 a term that year. And the people of the state, seeing this and seeing the legislature not particularly doing its job as it was supposed to, went into the state constitutional convention, which was something that we did much more frequently back then. And they set out an average of the salary that had been made in that term, where they made significantly more, to the $200. So you were making $150 before, you're making $400 in this term. Let's average it at $200. We're going to get rid of your per diem, and that's your salary. That was the only way that the people of this state had to deal with the legislature that was not necessarily living up to its obligations. I don't think that the people who passed this, and as was said in the record of that constitutional convention, which I urge the committee to go read, they didn't necessarily expect that 100 and some odd years later that the Constitution would become as stagnant a document as it did. They wouldn't expect that we would no longer be doing constitutional conventions as frequently as we did. And they certainly didn't expect it to be salaried in the Constitution. So what my bill does here, my constitutional amendment, is something that I think the legislature should do far more often, which is get rid of text rather than add it. And it gets rid of the salary cap in the Constitution, plain and simple. Doesn't add any money, doesn't well, I was just about to say doesn't retract any money, but in fact it does. It gets rid of the $200 salary that each of us as legislators have, and the $250 salary for the Senate President and the Speaker of the House. It leaves the mileage in the Constitution, the call for some kind of travel compensation. I left that in there because there's not an exact number set out in the Constitution, but setting out an exact number in Article 15 for our salaries, I think was a wrong-headed, rash way that the legislature was stopped from being corrupted. So what we're doing here in this constitutional amendment is removing that salary cap and leaving the Constitution without the budgeting of salaries. In effect, getting rid of the money. So, Mr. Chairman, I will end there by mentioning that this is not a Democratic bill or a Republican bill. This is a piece of legislation which I have majority members on. And just as a point of pride, Representative Sytek has sponsored this constitutional amendment, and he has told me that he hasn't sponsored a bill except for one where he sponsored his wife's bill when she was Speaker back in the 90s. So the fact that I was able to get Sytek to sponsor any bill, I'm quite proud of that, regardless of what happens to this amendment. But I do believe that this amendment has merit given the fact that we shouldn't budget in the Constitution. Thank you for your time, Chairman Hill.
Thank you. So you're a winner already.
Yeah.
We all win. We all win every day we're alive.
I wonder if you'd take questions.
Absolutely.
Are there questions for the representative? Representative Wade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a question that had come up yesterday in the Judiciary Committee and with a separate constitutional amendment, and I figured I would ask kind of a similar thing here. So basically, there was a constitutional amendment proposal that to remove the register of probate because it's no longer used for anything. But it didn't pass the public vote because the language was unclear. Voters didn't necessarily understand it. The language seems fairly straightforward to me, but do you think that this would get majority of support by the public and they would understand exactly what it does?
It's a good question. You know, you never know what the public is going to do in an election. But I would think that given the fact that we're just removing text from the Constitution, that the people of the state, I have faith in their ability to look at the question and understand it.
Further questions? Representative Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Wheeler. We've talked about this before. Why have you not thought of adding something? You're taking away the salary of $100 a year.
Right.
And a lot of people won't even run then if they can't even get that little. If this passes and the salary is taken away, that means somebody's going to be putting in legislation probably over and over and over again to figure out how much we really should get paid. Can you anticipate what will happen if this passes? Because my concern is that year after year after year, people will fight over what we're worth.
They do that year after year after year already.
Yeah.
So perennially, Chairman Hill, or when you're the chair of this committee and when it has happened in the past, gets to see legislation assigned to this committee, regardless of what form it might take, trying to pay the legislature. So
I have a follow-up.
You do, yeah.
Thank you. Have you looked into what other states have done, how they've determined what the salary should be?
absolutely.
Can you tell us?
New Hampshire is the only state which budgets its salary through the state constitution. And the other states, there is one other state which doesn't provide a salary, that is New Mexico, but they provide a per diem daily for the legislators who attend. So we are the only state that budgets to the state constitution, and every other state has, in one form or another through their budgetary process, salaried their legislature.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. In follow-up to the New Mexico example, do they do their per diem budget in the budgetary process or in the Constitution?
In the budgetary process.
Just thank you for clarifying
Yeah.
that for me.
And if I could, Chairman Hill, The reason I didn't put a pay in, I mean, I'll be blunt. I believe that the legislature should receive some sort of per diem, but I don't bring it up because that's not what this is about. This is a majority sponsored piece of legislation to remove what I see as a rash decision made by the citizens of the state in the late 1800s, which hundreds of years later has resulted in us budgeting through the Constitution. This is a piece of legislation, as we have discussed before, which allows us to actually have that debate. And regardless of what people believe, the majority of sponsors on this piece of legislation believe the legislature shouldn't get paid anything, including a mileage stipend. I disagree with that, but I'd like to be able to have the debate with them, which we cannot do with it being in the Constitution.
Further? Seeing none, thank you very much. I have no other pink cards. I will close CACR 22.